Hey folks, welcome to the final installment of the Beefalo Rush. I'll do at least one more video on this world, but this is the last one that'll be relevant for rushing a Beefalo before the first spring. After this one, Friedrich will be fully domesticated, and a more appropriate title for the series will be something corny like The Adventures of Wendy and Friedrich. When we last saw the lone necromancer, she had killed the first deerclops only to be ambushed by a terrorbeak. I wasn't expecting to actually have any trouble with this guy, but I'd forgotten that logging out automatically dismounts you from your Beefalo the same way it automatically drops Chester's eye bone from your inventory. We're off to a great start here. I don't have enough grass to craft a spear. The smartest thing to do in this situation would probably have been to equip the wood armor and fight the terrorbeak with my axe, but I'm panicking slightly. I'm at less than half health and I'm really worried I'll have to waste a life-giving amulet. I decide to take the twigs from my backpack and use them to raise Friedrich's obedience while fending the terrorbeak off with my cane. I dropped Abigail's flower because I know that banishing a nightmare counts as a sacrifice to summon her, even though they're not technically dead. I guess the sacrifice is more about Wendy's perception of death than actual death. Or, it's an exploit that I'm abusing. Take your pick. There we go. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the Beefalo mounting animation contains some invincibility frames, like Wolfgang's transformation animation. I can never get it to work consistently, but sometimes enemies that attack as I mount just completely miss instead of transferring their damage to my Beefalo. If anyone can figure out how that works, I'd love to know. I'm fixing my mistake from part 1 here. If you put one nightmare fuel in each of Chester's slots on the night of a full moon, he transforms into Shadow Chester and gets 3 more slots. He has another form you can unlock that turns him into a portable fridge, but it costs 9 blue gems instead of nightmare fuel, which is kind of a steep price this early. George Eliot is all grown up, which is both a relief and a concern. Fully domesticated adult Beefalo will stop going into heat, but wild Beefalo and Beefalo that are only partially domesticated have a 20-day-long mating season every single spring. This will give George Eliot plenty of time to start repopulating the herd that I nearly wiped out, but it also means I'll have to deal with the inherent problems of living next to a heated Beefalo herd. I've never actually done this before, so I don't really have a plan. I'm just going to have to play it by ear. If you don't share my affection for Beefalo, I should tell you straight up that this is a terrible idea from a pure survival standpoint. The time and effort and resources that I'm going to put into caring for George Eliot and her kids will delay my fight with the dragonfly and put me in a fair amount of unnecessary danger. It's not even as if Beefalo are endangered globally because the other herd is going to multiply without any help from me. This is just some silly role-playing on my part, where I try to make some slight reparations for the horrific genocide I committed in part 1. Walrus men don't get that kind of sympathy from me, though. They can never go extinct. Charlie will bring them back every winter, no matter what I do. Now that Friedrich is my fully domesticated ornery steed, he's received 3 important buffs. Firstly, his damage per hit has been raised from 34 to 50, which is honestly kind of absurd because it's the damage that most characters get out of a tentacle spike, damage that Wendy and Wes would normally only get with a dark sword. It'll get even more absurd when I equip Friedrich with a war saddle later and increase his damage from 50 to 66. But the most absurd thing by far is that Friedrich is a weapon with infinite durability in a game that's mostly balanced around weapons and armor with finite durability. Part of what makes high damage modifiers so strong and low damage modifiers so crippling is that a character with a high damage modifier doesn't need to spend nearly as many resources preparing for a fight. Mighty Wolfgang doesn't just kill the same number of enemies as another character in half the time, he kills them with half the weaponry, using half as many healing and armor items in the process. But as long as she keeps Friedrich in good health, Wendy won't need to spend any resources on weapons and armor outside of the caves, ever. And sure, any character can ride an ornery Beefalo, but thanks to Abigail, Wendy can also resist sunlocking and deal consistent free area of effect damage while riding one. Abigail's area of effect damage could already situationally beat Wolfgang's damage per second on its own, but now Wendy has the freedom to wade deep into combat alongside Abigail with few, if any, consequences. Secondly, Friedrich's buck timer has received a bonus multiplier of 333%. This means that when the magical flash changed his appearance to show he was fully domesticated, it also instantly increased his buck timer from 4 minutes to 13 minutes and 20 seconds, which is so long that I'll probably never need to think about it again. I'm always going to dismount voluntarily before 13 minutes are up because I'll want to pick something up from the ground first. There's no fight on the surface that will ever require me to stay continuously mounted for 13 minutes. Lastly, Friedrich's obedience will no longer decay below 45%. This means that he will never again throw off his saddle, and I will never again have to feed him more than one expendable item to be allowed to ride. Other fully domesticated Beefalo variants will have obedience that never decays below 50%, allowing them to be ridden for free whenever you want. Marginally higher maintenance cost is the price you pay for the ornery Beefalo's extra 16 damage per hit. I think that the default domesticated Beefalo's infinite durability spear would still be pretty useful, but I'm willing to go the extra mile for the ornery's infinite durability tentacle spike. Tomorrow's the first day of spring. The last thing I need is for George Eliot to start a fight with Abigail. There's a much more efficient wall setup than the one I'm using for fighting Dragonfly solo. I don't know if Helical Puma invented it, but he certainly popularized it, and Don Johnny popularized an even more efficient version using burnt signs. The basic gist of the setup is that you trick the Dragonfly's children into getting stuck on impassable terrain that they aren't coded to recognize as impassable, like magma pools or burnt signs. I'll link their respective videos in the description. It's very clever, but I'm not going to use it because it breaks my immersion in the game to abuse such an overtly non-diegetic pathing exploit, and also partly because it makes the fight slightly less interesting to me. I have no qualms about other people using it, though. Dragonfly is a tough boss, and it's good to have all the advantages you can get. Besides, I use plenty of cheesy strategies in situations where they hurt my immersion less. I use the Pillar and Gravestone exploit to cheese the Ancient Guardian almost every time. I may do a video at some point on the subject of cheesy strats and what different players consider to be cheese, because it's a very interesting subject for me. The setup that I'm doing involves encircling each individual lava pool with about 20 walls, although you may need more than 20 if there's an inconvenient skeleton in the way. You won't be able to enclose the central pool until Dragonfly is already dead, because she guards it personally, like Smaug on his treasure hoard. I first saw this setup done by Edgy Rick, and I'll link him in the description too. To the best of my knowledge, Rick favors Helical Puma's method now, though. You're getting a little ahead of yourself there, sis. We're fighting Dragonfly in the next episode. There's not a whole lot that Wendy can do to quell Abigail's bloodlust without mods. The one thing you can do is run as far away as you can, as quickly as you can. This causes follower mobs like Abigail, Befriended Pigs, and Chester to teleport to your position, but slightly off-screen to preserve the illusion that they traveled under their own power, a la Jason Voorhees. If you don't do it quickly enough and Abigail dies, you'll know it because your backup flower will bloom. I see a lot of newer Wendy players keep turning back to check whether Abby's still following with their own eyes. I'd advise them to recall the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. The best way to get Abigail out of danger in unmodded DST is to run to safety and not look back. It's easy to start taking damage from overheating while working so close to the lava, so keep an eye on your health and go back to your base to recover if necessary. Chilled amulets can also be helpful. Alternatively, if your Beefalo catches fire, you might be filled with an urge to extinguish it with the ice staff. In most situations, you should probably resist this urge, though. Remember that your Beefalo has 1,000 health, and that fire damage only causes about 8 to 12 damage per second. There's no reason to panic. More importantly, hitting your Beefalo will cause it to lose 30% of its domestication and become aggressive to you, even if it's a weapon that causes no damage like the sleep dart or the ice staff. You're better off just saving the ice staff charge and letting the beef extinguish itself after a few seconds. George is already providing for a family of 5. Good for her. Aw man, a lureplant sprouted in my base while I was away. These things will eat the items you've left on the ground and eventually digest and destroy them permanently. You can recover undigested items from the central bulb though. I ought to lureplant-proof my base with some kind of artificial flooring so that this doesn't happen again. Looks like I lost an electrical doodad, but everything else seems okay. There's a moose goose nest fairly close to my base. This is another potential danger for George's fledgling herd, but even if I wasn't looking out for them, I'd probably take the moose goose on just for the feathers so that I can craft the weather pane. I want at least 5 moose goose feathers before spring ends, and ideally 10 or more. I start by giving one of the moslings a smack to get their mom's attention. Abigail would have lasted a bit longer here than she did in the fight against Deerclops, because Moose Goose has no area attacks. Abigail wouldn't have taken any damage while the moose was targeting me. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying enough attention to where and when Moose Goose landed to defend her babies, so Abigail ended up dueling her alone for a good while off-screen. My bad, sis. That being said, fighting Moose Goose on an ornery Beefalo has its own advantages. Every 5th attack by Moose Goose is a startling honk that causes you to drop the item in your hand slot. But since you can't drop a Beefalo, you're immune to this effect. You can kite her with a pattern of 3 hits, dodge, 3 more hits, dodge, 3 more hits, and then 6 hits. I learned this trick from Helical Puma's second random tips video, but he generally doesn't get an ornery Beefalo until much later in the game. I'm messing up the kite pattern a lot because, as usual, kiting is my weakness. But I have a lot of room for error. Friedrich can take 13 hits from the goose even without regenerating, and he'll regenerate enough health to take another hit about once every 2 minutes. Still, this is only the first phase of the fight, and I want him reasonably healthy for phase 2. Phase 1's over. Now the moslings will swell up and defend themselves with lightning and whirlwind attacks. It's good to try to get Abigail back during this phase if you lost her during Phase 1. She'll help fend most of the moslings off while you focus them down one at a time. That was a good opportunity to get Abigail back, but I forgot to drop the flower first. I'm being pretty dumb about this fight. There we go. Good to have you back, sis. Thanks again for stopping by, folks. Next time, Friedrich and I will finally take down the dragonfly. Please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Later!